Shalom, shalom. Welcome, welcome, world changers. Tonight we're going to get into the book of 4 Maccabees. That is the fourth book of Maccabees. Just to make it clear, this is not the fourth chapter of the book of Maccabees, but this is the fourth book of Maccabees. This is a very, very powerful book and contains a very powerful set of lessons. So I'm going to dive into this in just a moment. But what you need to know about 4 Maccabees is that it's very hard to find a Bible that has 4 Maccabees in it. There are a few that do have it in it, but it's hard to find a book with 4 Maccabees, a Bible that is, with 4 Maccabees. I am going to be reading from ebible.org. That is ebible.org. I find it's one of the best resources for this particular book, that is, the fourth book of Maccabees. Now, I'm sure you could probably download a free copy of it through the internet somewhere, but you're not going to find it in most Bibles. Most Bibles have 1, 2, and 3 Maccabees, but not 4 Maccabees. So this is somewhat of a secret book, a hidden book. All right, so just before we dive into the goodness of this book, I'm going to get into the live chat, but I'm also going to give you a little bit of a background about myself as well, because I'm going to be interjecting throughout this book. But let's see what we have here in the live chat. We have Calamento says, shalom, everyone. Shalom, Calamento. Psalm 94 says, shalom, everyone. Shalom, Psalm 94. Good to see you. Okay, so a lot of people don't know that there is a more, I guess you would call, what some people might call a spiritual side of myself. There has been many times when I had prayer meetings, and in the prayer meetings we would just pray and we would worship and we would sing and we would really just draw near to God and just have a wonderful time in the presence of God. And I have been more or less accused before of not getting into the word so much. Some people say, "Oh, I've heard people say, well, you need to get more into the word. You're too much into the spirit, so to say." And those people just know that side of me. Then there are people who say, "Well, I need to have more of the spirit because I'm into the word so much." My point is this: do not judge based upon only what you see. There is a side of me that's very much into the word. There's another side of me that's very much into the spiritual side of that side of things, if you want to put it that way. To the point where people accuse me of being both. Okay, this book is a book that is about more of the word, more of study. It's about reason. It's about intellectual capacity. It is one of the, in my opinion, is one of the most powerful books in the scriptures. Okay, and so it is found in some Bibles, like I said, but in many Bibles, you won't find it in there. So let's dive right into this. We're going to read the first 6 chapters of 4 Maccabees. Now, there is 18 chapters in all, but I'm going to be reading only 6 chapters tonight, and Lord willing, the next 6 chapters tomorrow night, and the final night would be the last 6 chapters. So let's do this for the 4th book of Maccabees. Now, for those of you who have not ever dove into the 4th book of Maccabees, you're in for a treat. You're in for a real treat tonight. The 4th book of Maccabees. The 4th book of Maccabees appears as an appendix to the Greek Septuagint. It is considered to be Apocrypha by most church traditions. It is preserved here for its supplementary historical value. I would dare add that it has a whole lot more than historical value to it. It has a lot of wisdom in it as well, and knowledge. 4 Maccabees chapter 1. As I am going to demonstrate, a most philosophical proposition, namely that religious reasoning is absolute master of the emotions, I would willingly advise you to give the utmost heed to philosophy. For reason is necessary to everyone as a step to science. In addition, it embraces the praise of self-control, the highest virtue. Now, let me just say this once again, because this is amazing, okay? And I want you guys to think about this for a minute, because this is truly amazing. It says here that religious reasoning is the absolute master of emotion. A lot of people do things out of emotion, right? A lot of people make decisions out of emotion. A lot of people do different things out of emotion. And a lot of times it's like, well, I shouldn't have done it out of emotion. I should have just waited. I should have just thought about it. And this is what this is about. Thinking and reasoning is absolute master. Let me just say this before I go further. I believe that God is an intellectual God. I believe that God has a very high intellectual capacity. I know that sounds like it's like a given. Like, yeah, but yes, I believe that God has a very high intellectual capacity. Therefore, the more we get closer to God, the more we get close to this intellectual capacity. I believe that lack of intellect or lack of knowledge is akin. It's like being in the dark. A lot of people have fear of darkness, the fear of the dark. You're afraid of the dark. And so this is the thing. If you knew, you wouldn't be afraid, right? It's what you don't know is what makes you afraid. And so it's very important to get educated, to use your God-given reason, your God-given intellect, and to shine light into that darkness. So reasoning, I believe, is of God. Every bit of reasoning is of God. God is a God of reason, whereas the devil is unreasonable. God is reasonable. The devil uses the way the devil operates is to get you to operate without using your reason, without using your brains. It says in Acts chapter 3 that Jesus was crucified because of the ignorance of the rulers. It's through ignorance that the devil works. And it's through knowledge and reason that God works. God is the author of all good information, and all true information, all true knowledge comes from God, because God is the God of truth. Therefore, all truth is from God. So let's read this one more time, because this is very, very rich. Okay, it says here again, as I'm going to demonstrate a most philosophical proposition, namely that religious reasoning is absolute master of the emotions. Namely I would willingly advise you to give the utmost heed to philosophy. For reason is necessary to everyone as a step to science. In addition, it embraces the praise of self-control, this virtue, the highest virtue, self-control. Verse 3, if then reasoning appears to hold the mastery over the emotions, which stand in the way of temperance, as a gluttony and lust, it surely also and manifestly rules over the affections which are contrary to justice, such as malice, and of those which are hindrances to courage, such as wrath, pain, and fear. Let's just read this one more time. Again, this is powerful. If then reasoning appears to hold the mastery over the emotions which stand in the way of temperance, such as gluttony and lust, it surely also and manifestly rules over the affections which are contrary to justice, such as malice, and of those which are hindrances to courage, such as wrath, pain, and fear. Perhaps some may ask, how is it then that reasoning, if it rules the emotions, isn't also master of forgetfulness and ignorance? They attempt a ridiculous argument, for reasoning does not rule over its own emotions, but over those that are contrary to justice, courage, temperance, and self-control, and yet over these so as to withstand without destroying them. So in other words, with reason, using reasoning, we obtain justice, courage, temperance, and self-control. Verse 7. I might prove to you from many other considerations that religious reasoning is sole master of the emotions. But I will prove it with the greatest force from the fortitude of Eleazar and seven kindred and their mother who suffered death in defense of virtue. Okay, so let me just pause here for a second. We actually read about this in Second Maccabees. Maybe some of you will recognize the story as we get into it. We read about this a few days ago in Second Maccabees. Verse 9, for all these, treating pains with contempt, even to death, by this contempt demonstrated that reasoning has command over the emotions. For their virtues then, it is right that I should commend those men who died with their mother at this time on behalf of nobility and goodness, and for their honors I may count them blessed. For they, winning admiration not only from men in general, but even from the persecutors, for their courage and endurance became the means of the destruction of the tyranny against their nation, having conquered the tyrant by their endurance, so that by them their country was purified. Think about this for a minute. By these 8 people, actually, it's almost like Noah and the ark with 8 people. By these 8 people, through reasoning, God-given reasoning, their country was purified. Think about that. How can you purify a country? Through your reasoning. Wow. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Verse 12. But we may now at once enter upon the question, having commenced, as is our custom, with laying down the doctrine, and so proceed to the account of these people, giving glory to the all-wise God. Therefore, the question whether reasoning is absolute master of the emotions. Let's determine then what reasoning is and what emotion is, and how many forms of emotion there are, and whether reasoning rules over all of these. Reasoning is intellect accompanied by a life of righteousness, putting foremost the consideration of wisdom. Wow. What an amazing definition this is. This should be in the Webster's Dictionary for sure. Reasoning is intellect accompanied by a life of righteousness, putting foremost the consideration of wisdom. Wisdom is a knowledge of divine and human things and of their causes. This is contained in the education of the law, by means of which we learn divine things reverently and human things profitably. Okay. Again, this is contained in the education of the law. Now, in context, this would be the Torah. By means of which we learn divine things reverently and human things profitably. The forms of wisdom are self-control, justice, courage, and temperance. The leading one of these is self-control. In other words, out of all these, self-control is the best. The leading one of these is self-control, by whose means, indeed, it is that reasoning rules over the emotions. Of the emotions, pleasure and pain are the two most comprehensive. And they also, by nature, refer to the soul. There are many attendant affections surrounding pleasure and pain. Before pleasure is lust, and after pleasure, joy. Before pain is fear, and after pain is sorrow. Wrath is an affection, common to pleasure and to pain, if anyone will pay attention when it comes upon him. There exists in pleasure a malicious disposition, which is the most complex of all the affections. In the soul, it is arrogance, love of money, thirst for honor, contention, faithlessness, and an evil eye. In the body, it is greediness, indiscriminate eating, and solitary gluttony. Let's read this again. There exists in pleasure a malicious disposition, which is the most complex of all the affections. In the soul, so in other words, so there can be, and this is what a lot of people don't realize, especially those who are Gnostic or those who are quasi-Gnostic. Some Christians actually are what I would call quasi-Gnostic, because they put a lot of emphasis on the spirit and de-emphasize, or they cast down the flesh, in accordance to their interpretation of Paul's letters. But that's very Gnostic. Everything that's flesh is bad and everything that's spirit is good. And that's not true. Because we see here in the soul, which is spiritual, we have evils. We have evils that are not fleshly. Arrogance, love of money, thirst for honor, contention, faithlessness, and an evil eye. Here's the flesh. In the body, it is greediness, indiscriminate eating, and solitary gluttony. Verse 28. As pleasure and pain are, therefore, two growths out of the body and the soul, so are many offshoots of these emotions. Reasoning, a universal farmer, purging and pruning each of these, tying up, watering, and transplanting, in every way improves the materials of the morals and affections. For reasoning is the leader of the virtues, but it is the sole ruler of the emotions. Notice how many times it says that here. It says that over and over and over and over again. Reasoning is the sole ruler of the emotions. And we have Vinny. Vinny says, shalom, everyone. Shalom, Vinny. Good to see you, brother. Amazing, amazing. Moving on here with verse 30, the last half of it. Observe then first, through the very things which stand in the way of temperance, that reasoning is absolute ruler of the emotions. Now, temperance consists of a command over the lusts, but of the lusts, some belong to the soul and others to the body. See, this is contrary to the Gnostic proposition. And Gnostics would say that the body is bad and the soul is good, but that's not true, right? It's I believe this is true, that but of the lusts, some belong to the soul or the spirit, and others belong to the body. Reasoning appears to rule over both. Okay, so we read, how many times does it say rule here, by the way? Let's just see. Let's just check this out. 8 times. 8 times. You know, it talks about mastery in verse 3, but rules, reasoning rules over the affections in verse 4. It rules over the emotions in verse 5. Um, Verse 6, it doesn't rule over its own emotions. Verse 14, it rules over all of the emotions. Verse 19, it rules over the emotions. Verse 30, it is the sole ruler of the emotions. And verse 30 again, the absolute ruler of the emotions. In verse 33, it appears to rule over them both soul and body. So reasoning is the key here. Intellect, I love this this definition up here. This is awesome. No, where was it here? For reason is necessary to everyone as a step to science. Here it is, verse 15. Reasoning is intellect accompanied by a life of righteousness, putting foremost the consideration of wisdom. That should be in the dictionary, right? Under reason, say, reasoning is intellect accompanied by a life of righteousness, putting foremost the consideration of wisdom. Love it. So, verse 33. Otherwise, how is it that when urged on to forbidden meats, we reject the gratification which would come from them? Isn't it because reasoning is able to command the appetites? I believe so. Hence it is. Now, some of you guys, let me just pause here for a second, because I get this a question every now and then, is how do you overcome lust? Here's the answer right here. 4 Maccabees chapter 1, reasoning. It's through reasoning you can overcome the appetites of sin. With reasoning, you can quench the fires of illicit passion, if you will. Verse 34. Hence it is when craving seafood, birds, four-footed animals, and all kinds of food which are forbidden to us by the law, we withhold ourselves through the mastery of reasoning. For the affections of our appetites are resisted by the temperate understanding and bent back again, and all the impulses of the body are reined in by reasoning. So people who are given over to lust, or people who have a hard time with it, or people who have been, their lives have been destroyed by it, which a lot of people have, this is the ingredient they're missing. This is it right here. Reasoning. It's by reasoning you can quench those appetites. 4 Maccabees chapter 2. Is it any wonder if the lusts of the soul, after participation with that which is beautiful, are frustrated? On this ground, therefore, the temperate Joseph is praised, in that by reasoning he subdued on reflection the indulgence of the senses. So we know now. You know the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis, where he could have had his, time with with Potiphar's wife, and he refused to. And according to this, he refused to on the basis of it was his reasoning that got him out of trouble. Verse 3, for although young and ripe for sexual intercourse, he nullified by reasoning, here we go, nullified by reasoning the stimulus of his emotions. Now, let me just say this before we go any further here. If any of you guys know of anyone who needs to hear this, send them a message. Let them know to join, to watch, okay? This is it. This is the key to overcome sin, to overcome lust, right here. Reasoning rules. According to the author here, Joseph ruled sin, was master over sin because of his reasoning. The Great Deception says, shalom, everyone. Shalom, Alan. Good to see you, brother. Good to see you. Verse 4. It isn't merely the stimulus of sensual indulgence, but that of every desire that reasoning is able to master. For instance, the law says, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor anything that belongs to your neighbor. Now then, since it is the law which has forbidden us to desire, I shall much the more easily persuade you that reasoning is able to govern our lusts, just as it does the affections which are impediments to justice. Since in what way is a solitary eater, a glutton, and a drunkard reclaimed, unless it is clear that reasoning is the Lord of the emotions? See, this is a thing. If you know somebody who's struggling with sin, maybe somebody who's struggling with addiction, or somebody who's struggling with, maybe they have a life full of bad decisions, you should ask them why, or encourage them to think of the reason why they're doing what they're doing, why they've always done what they've did. Think about the reason. Use their God-given intellect. Alan says, feel, think, then act. That is mature. Feel, act, then think. Not good. Absolutely. For sure. Verse 8, therefore, a man who regulates his course by the law, even if he is a lover of money, immediately puts pressure on his own disposition by lending to the needy without interest and canceling the debt on the 7th year. If a man is greedy, he is ruled by the law, acting through reasoning, so that he doesn't glean his harvest crops or vintage. In reference to other points, we may perceive that it is reasoning that conquers his emotions. For the law conquers even affection toward parents, not surrendering virtue on their account. It prevails over love for one's wife, rebuking her when she breaks the law. It lords it over the love of parents toward their children, for they punish them for vice. It domineers over the intimacy of friends, reproving them when wicked. Don't think it is a strange assertion that reasoning can, on behalf of the law, conquer even enmity. It doesn't allow cutting down the fruit trees of an enemy, but preserves them from the destroyers and collects their fallen ruins. Reason appears to be master of more violent emotions, like love of empire, empty boasting, and slander. For the temperate understanding repels all these malignant emotions, as it does wrath, for it masters even this. Thus Moses, when angered against Dathan and Abiram, did nothing to them in wrath. See, that's a very important lesson for everyone. You know, when you are angry, here we got emotion. Don't let your emotions get the best of you. Think first. Use your reasoning. So Moses, when angered against Dathan and Abiram, did nothing to them in wrath, but regulated his anger by reasoning. So you know what? Reasoning um, is one of the, how am I going to put this? Reasoning is one of the attributes of humility. Because if you're humble, you won't give in to your own emotions. You won't give in to your own anger. You won't give in to your own pride. You will think first. You'll think first. Verse 18, for the temperate mind is able, as I said, to be superior to the emotions and to correct some and destroy others. For why else did our most wise father Jacob blame Simeon and Levi for having irrationally slain the whole race of the Shechemites, saying, cursed be their anger? For if reasoning didn't possess the power of subduing angry affections, he would not have said this. For at the time when God created man, he implanted within him his emotions and moral nature. At the time, he enthroned the mind above all as the holy leader. Oh, that's awesome, isn't it? Isn't that awesome? Let me say that again. Verse 22. At the time of creation, he, that is, that would be God, enthroned the mind above all as the holy leader through the medium of the senses. He gave a law to his mind, but living according to which it will maintain a temperate, just, good, and courageous reign. How then a man may say, if reasoning is master of the emotions, has it no control over forgetfulness and ignorance? Good question. 4 Maccabees chapter 3. The argument is exceedingly ridiculous, for reasoning doesn't appear to rule over its own affections, but over those of the body, in such a way as that any one of you may not be able to root out desire, but reasoning will enable you to avoid being enslaved to it. One may not be able to root out anger from the soul, but it is possible to withstand anger. Any one of you may not be able to eradicate malice, but reasoning has force to work with you to prevent you yielding to malice. For reasoning is not an eradicator, but an antagonist of the emotions. Wow, that's pretty good. This may be more clearly comprehended from the thirst of King David. For after King David had been attacking the Philistines the whole day, he, with the soldiers of his nation, killed many of them. Then when evening came, sweating and very weary, he came to the royal tent around which the entire army of our ancestors was encamped. Now all the rest of them were at supper. But the king, being not much thirsty, being very much thirsty, although he had numerous springs, could not by their means quench his thirst. But a certain irrational longing for the water in the enemy's camp grew stronger and fiercer upon him, undid and consumed him. Therefore his bodyguards, being troubled at this longing of the king, took two valiant young soldiers, respecting the desire of the king, fully armed themselves, and taking a pitcher, got over the ramparts of the enemies, unperceived by the guardians of the gate. They went throughout the whole camp of the enemy in quest. Having boldly discovered the fountain, they filled out of it the drink for the king. But he, though parched with thirst, reasoning But he, though parched with thirst, reasoned that a drink regarded of equal value to blood would be terribly dangerous to his soul. Therefore, setting up reasoning in opposition to his desire, he poured out the drink to God. For the temperate mind has power to conquer the pressure of the emotions, to quench the fires of excitement, and to wrestle down the pains of the body, however excessive, and through the excellence of reasoning, to spurn all the assaults of the emotions. But the occasion now invites us to give an illustration of temperate reasoning from history. For at a time when our fathers were in possession of undisturbed peace through obedience to the law, and were prosperous, so that Seleucus Nicanor, the king of Asia, both assigned them money for divine service and accepted their form of government. Then certain people, bringing in new things contrary to public harmony in various ways, fell into calamities. 4 Maccabees chapter 4. For a certain man named Simon, who was in opposition to an honorable and good man who once held the high priesthood for life, named Onias, after slandering Onias in every way, Simon couldn't injure him with the people, so he went away as an exile with the intention of betraying his country. When coming to Apollonius, the military governor of Syria, Phoenicia, and Cilicia, he said, "Having good will to the king's affairs, I will come to inform you that tens of thousands in private wealth is laid up in the treasuries of Jerusalem, which do not belong to the temple, but belong to King Seleucus." Apollonius, acquainting himself with the particulars of this, praised Simon for his care of the king's interests, and going up to Seleucus, informed him of the treasure. Getting authority about it, and quickly advancing into our country with the accursed Simon and a very heavy force, he said that he came with the commands of the king that he should take the private money of the treasury. The nation, indignant at his proclamation and replying to the effect that it was extremely unfair that those who had committed deposits to the sacred treasury should be deprived of them, resisted as well as they could. But Apollonius went away with threats into the temple. The priests, with the women and children, asked God to throw his shield over the holy despised place. And Apollonius was going up with his armed force to seize the treasure, when angels from heaven appeared riding on horseback, all radiant in armor, filling them with much fear and trembling. Apollonius fell half dead on the court which is open to all nations, and extended his hands to heaven, and implored the Hebrews with tears to pray for him, and to take away the wrath of the heavenly army. For he said that he had sinned so as to be consequently worthy of death, and that if he were saved, he would proclaim to all people the blessedness of the holy place. Onias, the high priest, induced by these words, although for other reasons anxious that King Seleucus wouldn't suppose that Apollonius was slain by human device and not by divine punishment, prayed for him. And he, being thus unexpectedly saved, departed to report to the king what had happened to him. But on the death of Seleucus the king, his son Antiochus Epiphanes succeeded to the kingdom, a terrible man of arrogant pride. He, having deposed Onias from the high priesthood, appointed his brother Jason to be high priest, who had made a covenant if he would give him his authority, to pay yearly 3,660 talents. He committed to him the high priesthood and rulership over the nation. He both changed the manner of the people and perverted their civil customs into all lawlessness, so that he not only erected a gymnasium on the citadel of our country, but neglected the guardianship of the temple. Because of that, divine vengeance was grieved and instigated Antiochus himself against them. For being at war with Egypt, he heard that on a report of his death being spread abroad, the inhabitants of Jerusalem had exceedingly rejoiced, and he quickly marched against them. Having subdued, he established a decree that if any of them lived according to the ancestral laws, he should die. When he should by no means destroy, by his decrees, the obedience to the law of the nation, but saw all his threats and punishments without effect, for even women, because they continued to circumcise their children, were flung down a precipice along with them, knowing beforehand of the punishment. When, therefore, his decrees were disregarded by the people, he himself compelled by a means of tortures every one of this race, by tasting forbidden meats, to renounce the Jewish religion. 4 Maccabees chapter 5. The tyrant Antiochus, therefore, sitting in public state with his assessors upon a certain lofty place, with his armed troops standing in a circle around him, commanded his spear-bearers to seize every one of the Hebrews, and to compel them to taste swine's flesh and things offered to idols. Should any of them be unwilling to eat of the accursed food, they were to be tortured on the wheel and so killed. When many had been seized, a foremost man of the assembly, a Hebrew, by name Eleazar, a priest by family, by profession a lawyer, and advanced in years, for this reason, known to many of the king's followers, was brought near to him. Antiochus, seeing him, said, I would counsel you, old man, before your tortures begin, to taste the swine's flesh and save your life. For I feel respect for your age and hoary head, which, since you have had so long, you appear to me to be no philosopher in retaining the substitution of the Jews, the superstition of the Jews. In other words, oh man, you're smarter than that. You're smarter than that. You know that you should taste swine's flesh. You're smart enough not to resist me. In other words, you're setting a trap for him. For therefore, this is verse 7. For therefore, since nature has conferred upon you the most excellent flesh of this animal, do you loathe it? In other words, since this pork tastes so well, the meat is so good, do you loathe it? Verse 8. It seems senseless not to enjoy what is pleasant, yet not disgraceful, and from notions of sinlessness, reject the gifts of nature. You will be acting, I think, still more senselessly if you follow vain conceits about the truth. You will, moreover, be despising me to your own punishment. Won't you awake from your trifling philosophy? Give up the folly of your notions, and regaining understanding worthy of your age, search into the truth and expedient course. Won't you respect my kindly admonition and have pity on your own years? For bear in mind that if there is any power that which watches over this religion of yours, it will pardon you for all transgressions of the law which you commit through compulsion. Wow, imagine that! Like, look at how much they were like trying to get him to taste pork. They were trying to get him to taste pork. Like, you're smarter than that, old man. I mean, you wouldn't give your life just so that you don't have to taste pork. I mean, and God will forgive you anyway. Now, that's basically what they're saying to him. Verse 14, while the tyrant incited him in this manner to the unlawful eating of meat, Eleazar begged permission to speak. Having received permission to speak, he began to address the people as follows. We, O Antiochus, who are persuaded that we live under a divine law, consider no compulsion to be so forcible as obedience to that law. In other words, there's no force, there's no compulsion that is stronger than the Torah. Therefore, we consider that we ought not to transgress the law in any way. Indeed, were our law, as you suppose, not truly divine, and if we wrongly think it divine, we would have no right even in that case to destroy our sense of religion. Don't think that eating unclean meat is a trifling offense. For transgression of the law, right, to transgress the Torah, whether in small or great matters, is of equal importance. For in either case, the law is equally slighted. But you deride our philosophy as though we lived in it irrationally. Key word there, irrationally. It instructs us in self-control. Right? So again, if you want self-control, it's a fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is self-control, which is also a fruit of the Torah. Right? Because every fruit of the Spirit is actually a fruit of the Torah, by the way. Because the Torah came by the Spirit. Yet, it instructs us in self-control so that we are superior to all pleasures and lusts. And it trains us in courage so that we cheerfully undergo every grievance. It instructs us in justice so that in all our dealings we render what is due. It teaches us piety so that we properly worship the one and only God. That is why we don't eat the unclean. For believing that the law was established by God, we are convinced by the creator of the world, in giving his laws, sympathizes with our nature. Those things which are suitable for our souls, he has directed us to eat, but those which are not, he has forbidden. Interesting. Those things which are suitable for our souls, he has instructed us to eat. So all clean foods, according to this, is quote unquote suitable for the soul. And things like pork and shellfish are not suitable for the soul. Notice it's not talking about health here. It's not talking about suitable for the body. It's not talking about suitable for the flesh. It's not talking about health, as a lot of people today talk about being healthy when they eat clean. It's talking about the spiritual part of it. Eating unclean meats, according to the Torah, is not suitable for the soul, not healthy for the soul. Verse 27, but tyrant-like, you not only force us to break the law, but also to eat, that you may ridicule us as we thus profanely eat. See, a tyrannical government will force you to do something that's against the Torah. Verse 28. But you won't have this cause of laughter against me, for I will, nor will I transgress the sacred oaths of my forefathers to keep the law. No, not if you pluck out my eyes and consume my entrails, consume my guts. I am not so old and void of courage as to not be youthful in reason. There we are. Keyword. Reason, and in defense of my religion. Wow. That's courageous. Now then, prepare your wheels. I've seen actual ancient torture devices very similar to this, where they're put on wheels and they're put on like these torture devices, and they're literally torn apart, slowly torn apart. It's a horrific thing, but this guy is very, very courageous. Obviously, verse 32, now then prepare your wheels and kindle a fiercer flame. I will not so pity my old age as on my account to break the Torah, break the law of my country. I will not play false to you, O law, my instructor, or forsake you, O beloved self-control. I will not put you to shame, O philosopher, reason with a capital R, or deny you, O honored priesthood and knowledge of the law. See how much, notice, like as I read, let me just say this, quick little interjection here. Notice how the Torah is viewed here by these people. The Torah is viewed as like the best of the most honorable. It's like, we will obey the Torah no matter what. No matter what. We will defend the Torah and the knowledge of the Torah. And you look at Christians now. Look at how they are now. They're like, oh, well, forget about the Torah. By the way, from my experience, Christians, for the most part, don't really know much about the Torah at all. They're very, very Torah illiterate. The only thing they know about the Torah is what they fabricate to fit their narrative about why Jesus died. That's the truth. I've been there. So this is Eliezer saying, I will not put you to shame, O philosopher, reason. In other words, he's going to choose reason over everything. I won't deny you, O honored priesthood, the office of the priesthood given by God, and the knowledge of the law. Mouth, you shall not pollute my old age, nor the full stature of a perfect life. My ancestors will receive me as pure, not having feared your compulsion even to death. For you will rule like a tyrant over the ungodly, but you will not lord it over my thoughts about religion, either by your arguments or through deeds. Powerful. 4 Maccabees chapter 6. When Eliezer had in this manner answered the exhortations of the tyrant, the spear bearers came up and rudely dragged Eliezer to the instruments of torture. Reminds me of how people are treated rudely, especially what we saw. And I know it's not to this extent, but it just reminds me of some of the ways that people were treated rudely in Ottawa, Canada, back in February by the authorities. Came up and rudely dragged Eliezer to the instrument of torture. First, they stripped the old man, adorned as he was with the beauty of piety. Then, so you can imagine, they stripped him. They stripped him publicly. Then, tying back his arms and hands, They disdainfully flogged him. See, this is what happens when you are given more to the government than you are to God. Ask the people. Ask the people, the government, um, the officials of the government of Germany back in the mid 20th century. Even the churches of Germany back in the mid 20th century that supported it. It's the way a lot of churches are today. They support the government more than they support God. They don't tell you that, but by their actions they do. Verse 4, a herald opposite cried out, "Obey the commands of the king." But the high-minded and truly noble Eleazar, as one tortured in a dream, ignored it. As one tortured in a dream. In other words, he scorned them to the point where it's like, this is not even real to me. This is not even real to me. It's like, you guys are not as real as the Torah is. You guys are not as real as the law of God is. You guys are like a dream. Verse 6, but raising his eyes on high to heaven, the old man's flesh was stripped off by the scourges, and his blood streamed down, and his sides were pierced through. Falling on the ground from his body, having no power to endure the pains, he still kept his reasoning upright and unbending. Then one of the harsh spear bearers rushed at him and began to kick him in the side to force him to get up again after he fell. Again, this reminds me of what happened in February in Canada. Again, not to this extent, of course, but it does remind me of that, I must say. Verse 9, but he endured the pains, despised the cruelty, and persevered through the indignities. Like a noble athlete, the old man, when struck, vanquished his torturers, his face sweating, and he panting for breath. He was admired even by the torturers for his courage. Therefore, partly in pity for his old age, partly from the sympathy of acquaintance, and partly in admiration of his endurance, some of the attendants of the king said, "Why do you unreasonably destroy yourself, O Eleazar?" These miseries, see, actually, it was the opposite, right? Eleazar was actually doing this because of reason. They didn't see it. They saw it as unreasonable. We will bring you some meat cooked by yourself, and you can save yourself by pretending that you have eaten swine's flesh. Eleazar, as though the advice more painfully tortured him, cried out, "Let us who are children of Abraham not be so evil advised, as by giving way to make use of an unbecoming pretense. For it would be irrational, if, having lived up to old age in all truth, and having scrupulously guarded our character for it, we now turn back and ourselves become a pattern of impiety to the young, as being an example of eating pollution." So, in other words, he'd rather die than be a poor example, even if people thought that he ate swine's flesh when he didn't. It would be disgraceful if we would live on some short time, and that scorned by all men for cowardice and be condemned by the tyrant for cowardice, by not contending to the death for our divine law. Therefore you, O children of Abraham, die nobly for your religion. You spear bearers of the tyrant, why do you linger? In other words, hurry up, do what you got to do. Verse 24. Beholding him so high-minded against misery, and not chiding at their pity, they led him to the fire. Then, with their wickedly contrived instruments, they burned him on the fire, and poured stinking fluids down into his nostrils. He, being at length burned down to the bones and about to expire, raised his eyes Godward and said, You know, O God, that I might have been saved, that when I might have been saved, I am slain for the sake of the law by tortures of fire. Be merciful to your people, and be satisfied with the punishment of me on their account. Let my blood be a purification for them, and take my life in exchange for theirs. Thus speaking, the holy man departed, noble in his torments, and even to the agonies of death resisted in his reasoning for the sake of the law. Confessedly, therefore, religious reasoning is master of the emotions. There we see it again. For had the emotions been superior to reasoning, I would have given them the witness of this mastery. But now, since reasoning conquered the emotions, we befittingly award it the authority in the first place. It is only fair that we should allow that the power belongs to reasoning, since it masters eternal miseries. It would be ridiculous if it weren't so. I prove that reasoning has not only mastered pains, but that it is also superior to the pleasures and withstands them. Isn't that powerful? Isn't that powerful, people? Isn't that powerful? So that concludes our scripture reading for this session. So yeah, this is the reason why. This is the reason why. We do so much study here, and we I encourage good questions and thought. I mean, because all good knowledge, all good reason, all good education, all comes from God. All truth comes from the God of truth, and we need to seek it out. So many people out there, so many believers out there, so many Christians out there, they don't really put much thought to anything. They believe what they're told, and they go with it, and they run with it for the rest of their life. Because God forbid they believe anything. Oh, they're too good to believe anything that's not true, right? They're too good to be duped. They're too proud to believe, to admit that. And so they go their entire life living in vanity, in fantasy. So let's see what we have here in the live chat. Corey asks a question. I have a question from Brother Chris. Does God choose favorites? Yes, he does. I think that's pretty, we went through that in the scripture many times. Like, does he have a favorite apostle, a favorite servant or prophet? Yes, there is a hierarchy in God's mind. Okay, so in many people's mind, you would say Jesus is the favorite Son of God. Okay, now if we're born again, or if you could say if we are sons of God, then if we are born in his family, which by the way, by and large, most people are not. That's why they need to be, at least to be adopted by God. Depends on how you want to look at it. Most people would, especially Christians, would admit, that Jesus is the favorite. Like, no one's going to say I'm more favorite than Jesus or loves me as much as he loved. If anybody said that, if anybody said that God loved me as much as he loved Jesus, I would say, well, why didn't you get, like, the thunderous voice out of heaven below, behold my beloved son, when you were baptized? Um, yeah, I mean, even Jesus himself chose favorites. Um, Peter, James, and John were his favorites. They were the teacher's pets, right? The rabbi means teacher. He took Peter, James, and John places where he would not allow the other 9 to go. And so, yeah, and God said, I love Jacob, I hate Esau. He chose a favorite there. He said that before they were even born. He chose favorites. Yes, so God does choose favorites. Yes, he does. There is a hierarchy. And I believe that Jesus, the disciples knew that. That's why they asked Jesus, like, who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom? Are we going to be sitting at your right hand? Like, all this kind of, because they knew that there were people that were closer to God, that God favored more, and got people that God favored less. Very good question, Corey. Thank you for asking. Byron says, shalom and hello, everyone. Shalom and hello, Byron. Welcome, welcome. Just got off work. Hope it was a good day at work there, Byron. Corey asked the question, what should we say to those who say that Christianity shouldn't be involved with politics or the government through America, or the government, though America and its laws were founded by the Bible? I would say that, if you believe in the scriptures, right, if someone says that and they're not a believer, then, not much you can say. I mean, that's what they want. They don't want, God to have any part of politics whatsoever. But if they're a believer, um, at least if they believe in the scriptures, if they believe the scriptures are true, I would say, it's very clear. The scriptures are very clear, all the way through it, actually, all the way through from Genesis to Revelation, that that belief and practice of the Torah is of utmost importance. And utmost importance. We read a story tonight that shows how important it is to some people, but it's of utmost importance to God. People, it says in the Bible, that people have lost their land because they were not Torah observant. They have lost their land. The conquest of Canaan by the children of Israel, it says very clearly, Deuteronomy chapter 9. It says in the Leviticus as well, it's not so much that the children of Israel were so good. It's not that they were so good that they were able to dispossess nations, but it's because the nations themselves were evil as defined by the law of God. And so because of that, because the nations, different nations, did not go by the Torah, they lost their land. They lost their lives. They lost their land. They lost everything. They were dispossessed. I think that's what's happening actually in America, at least to a certain degree. That, I think that this is the reason why some countries, many countries in the world today, are in existence, America included, because they 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 were sent by, let me just put it this way, because they were founded upon the laws of God. And that's the reason why. That's the reason why God blessed America, because they were founded upon the laws of God. There's a thing here. Let me just, where am I going to find this? what's his name now? There's something I want to show you about that. Let me just see here. Alexis, his name is. Here's a very interesting little factoid. Alexis de Tocqueville. Maybe some of you guys might know what I'm going to say. A second here. Just want to be able to put this up on the screen so I can share it with you guys. This is a quote from Alexis de Tocqueville. So Alexis de Tocqueville, let me just, he was a French aristocrat, diplomat, political scientist, political philosopher, and historian. He set out on a mission. His project was to find out why America was so great. Okay. And so some of you guys might know this. If you don't know it, I think it's a good thing to take note. Get ready to take notes, guys. Okay, so check this out. Let me see if I can share the screen. All right. So Alexis de Tocqueville, okay, he comes over to America. I'm just going to set up a little bit of give you a little bit of background here. He comes to America to find out why America was so great. It was a study, being as a political scientist and historian as he wanted to know why is it? What is the secret behind America's greatness? And so this is what he said. Okay, let me just say, French writer Alexis de Tocqueville, after visiting America in 1831, he said, quote, "I sought for the greatness of the United States in her commodious harbors, her ample rivers, her fertile fields and boundless forests, and it was not there. I sought for the secret of the greatness of the United States. I sought for it in her rich mines, her vast world commerce, her public school system, and her institutions of higher learning, and it was not there. I looked for it in her democratic Congress and her matchless Constitution, and it was not there. Not until I went into the churches of America and heard her pulpits flame with righteousness did I understand the secret of her genius and power. America is great because America is good. If America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great." And the source of that, let me just pull off the source of that is, you can find that in America's God and Country by William J. Federer. Okay, again, very, very interesting. And this is actually in accordance with the scriptures. The scriptures tell us, if you're a nation, if you come in with righteousness, God will establish you and prosper you and bless you and make you great. If you lose your righteousness, you will lose your greatness. You will lose everything. You will lose all your blessing. You will lose your land even. It even says in the scriptures, the land will vomit you out. You will become the vomit of the land. So, I would say to anybody who says that, that we should keep religion away from politics, I would say do it and you will pay dearly. Do it and you will pay with everything you have. You may or may not see it in your lifetime. If you don't, you are sowing evil seed for the generations to come. That's what I would say. And again, that's an excellent question, Corey. Thank you for asking. Byron says, when I was growing up in school, we used to pray Our Father prayer every day. Ever since they stopped doing that, I noticed my country has been going downhill fast. Absolutely. 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 Yes. Um, yeah, I think it's very important. I think it's very I think it's very important. You know, even the game of chess. I know this is not maybe this is a poor argument, but I mean my argument is even the people who invented the game of chess knew that the king and the priests, right, the bishop, were very important in ruling the country, in ruling the board. Okay, you need that bishop there. You need the bishop with the king, and so yeah, we need the two. Um, we need government that will do what Eliezer did: the Torah, or I die. Give me Torah or give me death. Right? In the law, in the land. You read the laws of America. I have a copy of it. I don't have a copy of it right in front of me, but I do have a copy of it on another computer actually. But you read the laws of America way back when, like way back when. I forget exactly what year it was, like, but it was like, maybe a century ago or something like that. The laws of America were very, very much like the laws of the Torah. Everything the Torah condemned, America condemned. And that's the reason why God blessed America. Same with Canada, same with Australia, same with the West. But right now, if we are even being blessed, we are only coasting on that fuel that's already been burned in the past. That's exactly what's going on. In the way back in the day, I used to build model rockets, right? So model rockets, uh, when you fire the rocket off, you got the stage, they got the burning stage, and then you got a delay stage, right? Then you got the parachute that pops out. But what happens is during the when you're burning the fuel, of course it's being accelerated at a super high rate up, right? It's going up into the sky. And then there's a delay phase. And during that delay phase, it's still coasting. It's coasting. It's coasting. It's still soaring off of the fuel that was burned in the past. And then, of course, after so many seconds, it does start falling again. And then that's when the parachute is supposed to pop out. But right now, it seems like we are on the coasting stage. Maybe we have already turned around and starting to go down. Nevertheless, it's a really bad situation. Definitely very bad situation. Whenever anyone makes a law in the land, in any country, whenever anyone makes a law that goes against the law of God, you can be sure that you can be sure of pestilence, viruses, natural disasters, bad news. You can be sure of it. Bad news. If not in in the near future, it will happen in the future. May not happen today, or maybe it's already happening. It may not happen today, or it may not happen next month or next year, but it will happen. Sowing evil, bad seed, sowing seeds of weeds, of tares. Absolutely. And yes, I do. Yeah, Corey taking God out of schools, and the kids are learning lessons of wickedness. Absolutely. See, here's the thing. I know when they took the prayers and even handing out Bibles in the schools, um, when they took that out, they're like, oh, that's for that's not for the government to do, that's for the church to do. But this is the problem: the church is not doing it. They're not doing it. They're not teaching people up in the ways of God. They're not teaching people. I grew up. I learned the Lord's Prayer at school. I didn't learn it at church. I learned it at school. I got my first Bible at school. I didn't get it at church. I didn't get it anywhere else. I got it at school. I'll never forget my grandmother, who was born in 1913. My grandmother, who was born in 1913. She showed me this. She showed me her school book. It's an amazing thing. Amazing. It's her school primer. She called it primer, um, elementary school. And I opened it up and I looked through it. Page after page after page of scripture, 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 scripture. It was more than just learning the Lord's Prayer and praying the Lord's Prayer at school, public school. It was more than just getting a Bible and reading the Bible in school. It was actually learning lessons from the scriptures in school. I'm talking about school textbook. It wasn't a Bible. It was a textbook from the school. Every page had scripture on it. They say, and I believe that the rapture that a lot of Schofield Bible and Darby, students believe that is going to happen 7 years before Jesus comes back, to rule and reign. I believe the rapture. I believe there will be a rapture when Jesus does come back publicly, and it's not going to be a secret rapture. But the verses that are used for secret rapture are actually talking about death, as it was in the days of Noah. It says in Genesis, it also says in the book of Jasher that God waited until all of the righteous people died away first before the flood came. God will wait until the righteous people, with the exception of the remnant, quote unquote remnant, who will be left on the earth. See, back in the days of Noah, the remnant was Noah and his family. But I do believe that God is waiting before all hell breaks loose, literally on earth. So he is waiting for the last few of the righteous to die off. There will be a remnant, I believe, that will go through the quote unquote tribulation. I do believe that. But we are seeing a great dying off. Why? Because of what we're just talking about. When the children go to school, they're not getting Bibles anymore. They're not getting prayer anymore. They're not learning how to pray. They're not reading from textbooks that have scripture on every page anymore. And the entire thing is gone. It's a very sad situation. Very sad situation. You know what it says? 2 will be in one field, 1 will be taking the other left. 2 will be in the bed, 1 will be taking the other left. I believe that Jesus himself defined what he meant by taking when he said later on, he said, in the days of Noah, they were all eating and drinking and being merry until the flood took them away. The flood took them away through death. "911 says, I have heard you say that according to Torah, we are only required to do what we are capable of doing. Absolutely. I tried to look for those verses and couldn't find them. Do you know what book and verses those are in? Okay, so it's like it's a concept that we find throughout the Torah. Like one good example is Deuteronomy chapter 14. Deuteronomy chapter 14, it basically, now I'll just summarize it. It's talking about the tithes. And the tithes back in those days were not just, they were animal sacrifices. Okay. Um, so it's not just money. Like today, tithing is just money. But back in those days, it wasn't. It was animal sacrifices. It was animals. And the fruits of the crops, the first fruits and such like that, those tithes. So basically, summarized in Deuteronomy chapter 14, if um, if it's too far for you to go, let's say you live in Egypt and it's just too far for you to go to saddle up your donkey or your camel and carry all of the livestock that you need to sacrifice to Jerusalem. If that's just too much for you, don't worry about it. Just sell what you got, sell the animals that you would have sacrificed, and just enjoy. It's a paraphrase of what it says. So basically, the concept is not only are you not required to do it if you're not capable, but even if it's just too much for you, you're not required to do it. And also, I mean, it's just, I mean, without picking through, I can't really think specifically of another specific, like, point my finger on it, but the whole thing. I mean, like, for example, most of the Torah is for the Levitical priesthood. Does that mean that the little girl that lives next door is supposed to do it? That God expects her to do it? Of course not. It's a given. It's a given. I don't know how else to say it. It's a given that when you make a law, there are specific people that you make a law for. So you're not required to do anything that you're not capable of doing. The little girl next door is not capable of going to Jerusalem and being a high priest and following through with the Levitical laws that we read of in the book of Leviticus. So she's not required to do that. Number one, because she's a little girl. Number two, she's probably not a Levite. So yeah, it's just a given. The Torah should be looked at as we look at the law of the land today. When I say law of the land, I'm talking about the law of man. I'm talking about the laws of your state, county, country, whatever the case is. You have laws. Everyone has laws. And so if you're riding a bicycle down the street, you don't have to obey the laws of pilots, airplane pilots. Can you imagine? I mean, I'm telling you, you're going to be in bad shape. Don't do this, but you can't go. You'll get arrested probably if you go out on a runway at your local airport with a bicycle. Okay. You know what? Oh, well, I'm just obeying the law because the law says I'm supposed to start here and I'm going to take off over there. Excuse me. Those laws are for the pilots and for airplanes, not for bicycle riders. You know, if you're crossing the street, you don't obey the laws of buses. Okay. It's really just a given. It's like, it's actually pretty, it's clear in the scriptures as well. Like, this is for Levitical priests. This is for women. This is for men. This is for the strangers of the land. And so, yeah. If I were to brainstorm, I could probably think of many others. I mean, we've read through the entire Tanakh so far over the past several months. But I see it all the way through there. I see it all the way through there. It's a concept that is, I know. I pointed it out many times as I was reading it, as I'm reading through. If you watch the videos, you'll see it. But I pointed it out many times. It's one of those things. I would say Deuteronomy 14 is a good place to start. Deuteronomy 14 is a good place to start when it comes to the tithes. So it's the spirit of the Torah. I mean, God being a loving father, which I believe he is not a father that would command people to do something that they're not capable of doing. That is abuse. That, talk about irrational. That's being irrational. That's being a tyrant. That's being an abuser. And I don't believe God is any of those things. Right? So, that's it. I mean, Lord willing, next time we read through the scriptures, maybe, like I said, we go through so many concepts when we're reading the scriptures. We read through so much. It's like, oh, here's a concept here. Like, as we've been reading about the concept of the reasoning, uh, how God wants us to reason. God gave us a brain. Okay. Um, Many things. Yeah. So it's not something like, it's like a verse where it's like, thou shalt just do whatever you can do. It's not like that, but it is an overarching concept. So uh, that's where I would start there. 9/11. Thank you for asking. It's a very good question. Andrew asked a question. When Jesus cast demons out of people, why didn't he just destroy them? Very good question. Can they be destroyed permanently forever, or are they going to be tormented forever? I understand that they are supposed to be tormented forever, but not until their time. That's why we read in the Gospels where it's like, are you going to send us, are you going to judge us before the time? No, just go into the pigs, right? And the demons, evil spirits, do carry out God's purpose in a way, if you know what I mean. Like, for example, Jesus said, if you do not forgive others, you will be handed over to the tormentors. Who are the tormentors? Evil spirits. A lot of people who are being tormented right now, emotionally, mentally, they can find healing, and they can find an answer to their problem if they just forgive. If they really, really forgive their fathers, their mothers, these people forgive their friends that have mistreated them. And as I said, I have personally witnessed people that have not only been um, set free from evil spirits tormenting them, but also physical healings as well. Like this elderly lady, I mentioned this a few times before. She forgave her mother, and she didn't even pray. She did not even pray. She was walking with a walker. She was an elderly lady. She forgave her mother, and boom, miracle happened. She didn't need the walker anymore. She said everyone she lived in like a retirement home. She said like everyone there was astonished. What happened to you? You don't need a walker anymore? Don't need a walker anymore. She walked fine. God healed her. God set her free from that evil spirit that bound her. But you see, my point is this: God uses those evil spirits to carry out his judgments. If you do not forgive, you will be judged right here, right now. You can be. Let me put it that way. Maybe not always, but you can be. And so, like, look at Saul. It says an evil spirit from God came to torment him. Why is that? Because of his sin. He gave room. He gave the enemy, he gave the evil spirits legal right, legal ground, so to speak, in his life. Therefore, God said, hey, evil spirit, hey, you guys, you evil spirits, go to Saul. So if they were all destroyed, they couldn't do that, right? So they couldn't fulfill God's way of punishments, right? And his curses, the curses of the law, the curses that we find in the law. I hate to use the term curses of the law because it's so um, it's so overrated. It's so overused today, I should say, overused. But yeah, these some evil spirits are bound up, as it says in the book of Enoch. They are bound up in a place, you might call it hell, whatever your definition of hell is, bound up in the earth. But a lot of them aren't. In fact, I don't know. I don't know if I could say most of them aren't. Probably not. The same evil spirits that were in the pigs are probably still on earth today. The same evil spirits that Jesus cast out into the pigs. Absolutely. And the reason why they were in that man in the gospels is, or in people, is because those people opened the doors to those evil spirits. Today, people, to make it very, very simple, to say it simply, anytime you disobey one of God's laws, you open the door for evil spirits. I'm not saying that that the evil spirits are actually going to come in. Probably will if the door is open long enough. Maybe not. But regardless of the fact, anytime you disobey the Torah, you open the door for evil spirits. And that's just part of God's plan. That's how he works. Thank you for asking, Andrew. Excellent question as always. Ophi says, Shalom, Israel. Shalom, everyone. Shalom, Ophi. Good to see you. Welcome. Yeah, Corey, the churches are afraid of the government, aren't going to fight against the opposition, and God commanded us to. You see, that's the thing. They're afraid of losing their status, right, with the government. At least some of them are. Most of them probably. Very good. Thank you for reminding us. Repent, follow Yeshua, keep Yahweh's commands, and prepare your hearts. Amen. Very good. Very good. This is in the scriptures as well. I would have healed Babylon, but she would not. Exactly. Matthew 24, as in the days of Noah, as they were taken by the flood, one will be taken, one will be left. Yeah, absolutely. They'll be taken by death one way or another. When it comes to the rapture, I used to be a staunch, really strong pre-trib rapture, like pre-trib believer. But now I'm post-trib. I do believe there will be a rapture, but it will be post-trib, in as far as I understand. Yes, Corey, I don't think he loves everyone either. I don't think he loves everyone either. A lot of people don't understand that most people, by far, most people are not children of God. I know it's a very nice and flowery thing to think about. Oh, we're all children of God. Everybody alive on earth is children of God. Even the most evil of evil men that have ever lived, they're all just precious sons of God. No, not necessarily. No. That's why we need to be children of God, right? Okay, so that wraps us up. That wraps it up for today. Tomorrow, Lord willing, we will continue. It's an amazing book for Maccabees, the power of reason and why it is so good and godly and powerful to always use reason, to use your reasoning. Andrew asks a question: how can someone love God if God hates them? Well, I mean, if God hates somebody, I suppose it still could be possible that they could, in theory, that they could still love him. It just depends on how you want to look at it. I mean, Jesus taught us to love those who hate us, right? Um, I suppose it is possible in theory. It's a good thought there, Andrew. All right. So 911 says, thanks. Thank you very much, 911. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind, 911. I know there are many places. It's one of those things. Again, it's one of those things where it's like, it's a concept that you see. Oh, yeah, I see this, that God, doesn't, he's quite lenient on, like, for another example too. The laws, like sometimes the laws were changed, right? No, I shouldn't say changed, but even with Moses, for example, right? When um, you have the two sisters of the two women whose men died, or whose excuse me, whose husbands died, and and they're like, hey, the law says, that that it should be children raised up, and they're like, no, no. So there was a way made for them. Um, there's always there are always things like that where if it's not possible for a law to be fulfilled, it's not required, or sometimes God will make another way to fulfill it. God is a very reasonable God. He's a very reasonable God. Alan says, thank you, brother. Much love and blessings to you all. Thank you very much, Alan. Blessings and love multiplied back to you as well, brother. 911 says, God loves those who would love him. Yeah, that's a good one. Vinny says, thank you, Christopher. Many blessings to everyone. Shalom. Thank you very much, Vinny. Blessings multiplied back to you as well. Byron says, ever since I started following the Lord more, my dreams have been very vivid and odd. Interesting, Byron. Okay, guys, I'll see you again tomorrow night, or in Vinny's case, I suppose it would be tomorrow morning. But I'll see you guys tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern. Lord willing, we're going to pick up where we left off at 4 Maccabees, chapters 7 through 12. All right, so Byron says, have a great night, everyone. Thank you, Christopher, for reading and teachings. Thank you very much, Byron, for your fellowship. And thank every one of you. You guys, like I say, you guys are awesome. Thank you for your fellowship, your comments, your questions. You guys are world changers. Keep on pressing in, keep on pressing on. Keep on calling on him, and he will show you great and mighty things. And as always, I pray that every one of you, that the Lord will bless you and keep you, make his face to shine upon you, lift up his countenance upon you, and give you wonderful, wonderful shalom. Amen, amen. See you tomorrow night.